So last week, if you weren't with us, we kind of started this new series, this little walkthrough of the book of Joshua, and we saw a common theme early on in the book of Joshua, and that's what God was calling Joshua to do, and it's what Moses had been telling Joshua, and it was what God was telling Moses, and that was to be strong and courageous. And so we kind of talked about that, and we talked about what that looks like and how we do that, how we accomplish that. And we kind of saw that, you know, it looks and it starts with two things, and that is remembering and responding. You know, we looked at Joshua and how he remembered what God had done, and he responded accordingly. He responded based on what God had done, not just based on what he was seeing at the time. And so we kind of pick up with this and we continue on. We see where Joshua kind of accepted this call of God on his life, and now we see kind of where it has taken him from that point. It's no longer just the encouragement of being strong and courageous. Now he's living it out, having to make those steps and make those decisions on, okay, how do I do that now? And so we see that happening as we continue on in Joshua. And before we jump into it, you know, there were, Joshua 2 is where we're going to be at if you want to get a Bible open or an app open. We'll get there in a second. But, you know, what's going on here is Joshua sends out some spies. He sends some guys out into the land, into Jericho, and says, let's check out the area, let's check out the land, especially around here. Let's see what we're dealing with here. Like, God's told us this is our place, this is our land. It's a pretty fortified city. It's got some nice walls, which back in the day, I mean, you had walls, like you were set, you were good to go, because you could do all kinds of things with some walls. You know, that's like high tech right there. And so they could defend themselves, they could protect themselves, they can keep themselves close, they could attack from it. I mean, it's awesome. You ever watch old movies, like the old like war type battle where people were using swords and spears and, you know, scratching each other with them? No, they're doing some bad stuff. Like, you watch those old movies and you're just like, I don't know, I think that's kind of awesome. It's so manly. You see these guys like climbing walls, they're pouring hot tar down on them. You're like, oh my gosh, these people don't play. But this is this is what walls do for you. You can't do that if you don't have a wall. So kind of before we really dive into the passage, I just like, this started popping out to me, and I was like, you know, so many times in life we're the same way. We hit a wall. Like, we're walking through life, we're going through life, and then all of a sudden we see this where we're trying to go and what God has promised us, but there's a wall in front of it. And we sometimes can get a little discouraged because we feel like, man, there's no way we're going to get over that wall. If we try to climb it, it's so dangerous. It's too strong for us to just bust through and get through. But what I've learned and what we're going to learn through this passage is that when you hit a wall in life, God will simply provide a door. And so these spies went into the city, and they got in, and they were helped by this lady named Rahab. Now, Rahab, as a lot of people y'all might know, was not like a priestess woman or whatever. She was a prostitute, and so not like the kind of person you would think God's going to use this woman to do mighty things for the kingdom. But sure enough, she did have quite an impact. So much so, we're not going to harp on this, but I just think this is cool. So much so that in the Gospels, when we're reading like the genealogy of Jesus, like Rahab's mentioned in that. Like, number one, for a woman to be mentioned in the genealogy of that time, like, is very rare. And second, that it would be like, not like Mary, you know what I mean? It wasn't like, this was kind of like the contrast to Mary. You know, you see Mary like, oh, and you see Rahab say, woo, right? That's what you think about. And so, but like, this is who Jesus chooses to, like, they choose to say, like, this is Jesus' line right here. But I think that just shows us that, like, none of us are disqualified from being used by God. No matter where we've been or who we are or what we've done or what we're facing in life, like, God still can and will use us, and he'll do it with pride. He's not ashamed of you. He's not ashamed to say, look who my child is, and look where they were, and look where they are now, and I've redeemed them. Like, he takes honor in that and pride in that. He loves that. And so that's awesome. That's free. You don't have to pay for that. But so we look at these situations, and what I've learned and what we learn to do, just like these guys did, is you look for God right where you are. Because sometimes we get in these situations where it looks daunting and it looks challenging, and we use that, and it causes us to kind of feel like God has left us, or feel like God's abandoned us, or feel like we're on our own now. But those are the moments and those are the situations where we need to look for God. Not try to get to God somewhere else, but look for him where we are, because he is there. He will use whatever and whoever is around you. And whatever you have in your life, God will use it. Don't try and become someone different. Don't try and become something that you're not. Just give what you are and who you are to God and allow him to use that exactly as it is. So let's start reading here so we can hear some Bible words and not just Steveo words. Joshua 2, we'll start in verse 8. So these spies went out, right? So it says, actually, this is really cool. Because I like giving backstory. So they go, they meet Rahab, she helps them. She brings them in the house, and she kind of hides them. And guards are coming. Someone heard, they found out, like I think someone got in. They got in. And so they're going around, they're like, hey, those guys were here, we know it, like bring them out here. And she was like, oh, they were here, but they're not here anymore. They left earlier, actually. They went that way. It's like seriously, like it's kind of cartoons. Like, you went that way. Like, okay. They're like right here. And so she said they went over there. So if you go over there, you can catch them and hurry up. It's like, okay. And she had hid them. And so here's where we pick up in verse 8. So before the spies went to sleep that night, Rahab went up on the roof to talk to them. And she says, I know the Lord has given you this land. She said, we're all afraid of you. Everyone in the land is living in terror. For we have heard how the Lord made a dry path for you through the Red Sea when you left Egypt. And we know what you did to Sihon and Og and the two Amorite kings east of the Jordan River, whose people you completely destroyed. No wonder our hearts have melted in fear. No one has the courage to fight after hearing such things. For the Lord your God is the supreme God of the heavens above and the earth below. Now this is like some high praise. And this is some godly stuff. Like this is some wisdom. This is some acknowledgement of who God is, and it's coming from Rahab. Like she's not an Israelite. She's not a child of God, so to speak, in this time. I mean, and she's not even what you would consider like an upstanding citizen. You know what I mean? Like you wouldn't expect this. But she speaks like this, and she's telling them, I know that God's given you this land. I know it. And what happened was the Israelites' story and where they have been and what God had done for them has gone ahead of them. And it has shown to others who God was. And so many times, we want to make a difference. As believers, we want to have an impact. We want to help reach people. And we feel like, I can't do that. Like, I don't know what to say. I don't have all the words. I don't know everything. But really, what you got to realize is that your story is infused with God's power. Your story, your life, what God has done in you, there's power in that. And when people see that, they begin to see God move. They begin to see God work through what he's done in you. It'll cause their eyes to open up and say, this is the supreme God of the universe. This is the God that's over everything above and on earth. This is a God who will give his people whatever he promises them. But I think it has to do with how we respond to God in our lives. Because we know the story, and she sees it here. She's talking about, we're afraid. We've heard the stories. We heard how the Lord made a dry path for you through the Red Sea when you left Egypt. We heard how he did this. We heard how he gave you these victories. She didn't quite mention, we heard how y'all complained about how God saved y'all from Egypt and were worrying that you were going to die every 5 minutes. She didn't say that, right? But that's true. Like the Israelites, they didn't just walk through. Like it makes them sound really good from the stories, right? It's like, wow, yeah, look, God did all this for us. They can walk like, yeah. But we know what happened. Like we know that they struggled and they complained and they cried and they whined and they were in fear almost the entire time. Like every 5 seconds, like God would give them a victory, and it's like, yeah, God, you're our Savior, you're our deliverer. They're writing songs and woo, and then like tomorrow they're like, oh my God, it's gonna rain. I'm so scared. What's gonna happen? Like they're just, it completely turns around on them. But I believe the reason why their story had God's power in it, and the reason why their story made an impact in other people's lives was because they chose to follow anyway. Look, you can be afraid when God calls you out to do something. That's okay. You can be a little uncertain even. You can be a little unsure. You can question a little bit. As long as you move forward. As long as at the end of the day you say, okay, God, I'm scared. I don't get this. But I trust you. And I'm going to keep following you. And I'm going to take another step. And I'm kind of scared about the step you're going to ask me after that one, but we'll deal with that when we get there. I'm going to take this step. And when you respond that way, your story begins to show God's power and not your fear and your doubt. It reminds me of a story, and it's how you respond in those situations that has such a great impact. I'll give you an example. This is not like a very godly example, but it's a funny example to me. And because I think we put too much focus on wanting our story to be this miraculous, oh my God, God just came down. The dove came down when I got baptized, and it landed on my shoulder, and it didn't even poo on me. So it was godly, right? Like, we're just like, this is amazing. Like, and that's hard because we're like, you get that situation. I've heard it so many times. Like, Steve, I don't know what God's done for me. I don't know. I don't really have a story. Like, I don't have this huge God moment. I didn't have this salvation moment where like the heavens opened up and I was blind and now I see. Like, you just feel like I just kind of started going to church and doing stuff and made some decisions. I think, I don't know. I wrote it I checked the box. You know what I mean? Like, so you start thinking, I think I really made a hard decision, but I don't feel like it was a huge thing. So I'll give you an example of how you can allow these stories in your life to actually have a really big impact, and how you choose to respond will show the impact. So when I was just a small Mexican child, I don't know if I knew that or not, but when I was a child, I was Mexican. I think I still am, I'm not sure. So I grew up in the Houston area, Houston-Katy area, and so I was in junior high, and as you can guess, I was quite the athlete. And so when I got into junior high, the first year that they allowed us to play sports and play basketball, of course, they drafted me very quickly. And so I was on the basketball team, you know, probably 4'6" or something. I don't know, 65 pounds. I don't know. I think I was 17 by the time I broke 100. So, and so I was, you know, I played basketball, but I loved it. It was cool. But the only thing, and I know some of y'all parents know this because you have kids in sports and all that stuff, but practice was at like 5:30 in the morning. Like, if we got any parents with some early morning kid practices, some swimming and volleyball, yeah, I feel for you. And so we had to go really, really early, but it was cool. I got into this routine where my dad would take me to practice. So I would put on my practice uniform, you know, stuff with some like pants over it and a shirt over it, because it was like shorts and a little tank top, and I was tiny and I was cold. So I like put like, you know, the sport pants and a little shirt or a sweater or something over it. And I had my gym bag, my backpack, and I also had my trombone, because I played trombone back in junior high. I know, that's so cool. I'm so awesome. I very wisely switched from trombone to guitar later on in life. The ladies like the guitar a lot more than the trombone. Just saying. I didn't serenade Jerry like, that didn't happen. It wasn't gonna happen like that. Anyway, and so I got all my stuff, and it was cool because my dad was like, okay, come on, let's go. It's still dark outside. We get in the car. I would sit in the back seat so I could lay down and sleep for another 15, 20, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever. And like, of course, we had these huge cars, or like boats, you know, it's like a Crown Victoria or something. And so I had like all this room to just lay down. So I would lay down and sleep. Well, we had just recently moved to another house. My dad pastored a church, and there was like a house on the property. So we moved from the neighborhood that was like right by the school to a little bit further where this house was. So we just moved there. I didn't even remember the address that early in the morning, honestly. It was just a little early. So anyway, I wasn't feeling good, so I missed the day before of school, and so I was coming to practice. I didn't know when I showed up that my team wasn't having practice that morning. So we got out the car, and there's people there. This is how dumb I am. There's people there because some of the other teams were having practice, but then someone was like, hey, y'all aren't practicing today. I was like, oh, we're not? Oh, and I panicked. And so I took off, and I saw it, and then I turned around to get back in the car. My dad, hey, Dad. And my dad was like, he took off. He was like, my dad's straight business, man. This dude don't play. And he is like, he's not late. I don't know what happened to me. But he's never late. He's always like, he doesn't walk slow. Like, it just doesn't matter. He's just always A to B, like, it's just how he is. And so, he got in the car, and I got out the door and closed it, and he took off, and that dude was gone. And I saw him driving. I'm like, Dad, but because we're so poor, like, our windows were all jacked up, the tent was all bubbly, and the windows didn't even go down, so the cardboard was in the side. You know what I'm talking about? You have to lift it up. So it was like, they get all foggy and stuff, so you couldn't see me, and you wouldn't look at anyway. So he just books it off, and I'm like running with my backpack and my gym bag and my trombone case. And I'm like, Dad, and I just start running. Well, then before I realized that he takes off and he's gone. I don't know where he's at anymore. And I've gone down the road a little bit now, so I'm just like, I guess I'll just keep going. I don't know. I was like, I'll meet him at home. So I just started walking, and I remember getting to the end of the road where it's like, okay, you go left and you go right. And I was like, oh my God, I'm always asleep when we get to this point. I don't know if I go left or I go right. And I was like, I don't know which way. And it's before like Katie was blowing up and all this development. So there's a lot of woods and stuff. And so I thought I was smart. So I was like, okay, when I'm laying down, it feels like we go this way when he turns. So if I feel like I'm going this way, I'm turning this way. I was trying to be smart at 5:30 in the morning, and it didn't work. So I went a direction, it was the wrong way, and I started walking. I was probably walking for about at least a couple miles. I was walking for 20, 30 minutes probably, or at least 10, 15 minutes. I don't know, it felt like 5 hours, but it was a while. And cars are passing me by. There's like police cars passing by, and I'm like, oh my God. They didn't stop, I'm gonna die. And I got to the point where I started to accept, I was just like, I was starting to burn. I was like, okay, at what point do I ditch the trombone? Because I think this is my life now. I'm just gonna wander the streets. Like, I guess I don't have a family anymore. It's just me. Like, I gotta make it happen. I was like looking for a pawn shop to sell it to get some food. And so I'm walking the wrong way forever. Long story short, like, we're past that point, right? But long story shorter, finally, this car pulls up, and it's a white Camaro, I remember that. And he pulls over, and he gets out real quick, and he's like, hey, you need some trouble? Or you need some trouble? You need some trouble, kid? I'm like, yeah! He's like, hey, you in trouble? You need some help? And I was like, yeah, I'm not trying to go home. I don't know where I'm going. He's like, where do you live? I was like, I don't know. He was like, well, do you know the address? I was like, we just moved. I don't know. I was like, it's on the other side of Barker Cypress. I remember my dad saying that at one point, which is like, I don't know, a city. I'm like, on the other side of Barker Cypress. He was just like, all right, well come on, get in. We'll get in. I was like, okay. Like, children, kids, young people, don't do that. Don't be dumb like Steveo. Don't get into a car of a random white guy in a white Camaro if you don't know him, okay? It's just not safe, but Steveo did it. And so I got in the car, and we just started driving. And he's just like, what happened, And I'm like, we had practice, we did it, I don't know. And I'm just like, I'm freaking out a little bit, because I'm like, I don't know where I live. And he doesn't know who I am, where I live either. So he's just like driving, he's like, and I was like, I don't really know. And in my head, I could kind of hear the street name, but like I couldn't say it because I was scared it was a wrong street. And so I definitely didn't want to say that. So we're just sitting there. And I remember getting to a certain point where we get to a stoplight, and I was like, oh my God, we turn here. I know that we turn here. And we're stopped at the light, and I'm like, we gotta turn here. But I couldn't say it. Like, I couldn't get the words out. And I remember just sitting there, and I was like tearing up as like the light was changing, and they were manly tears, but still. This is the only time I ever remember crying. But and so he like starts pulling off, and he's driving forward, and I'm just like, because I'm like, I don't know, I just couldn't say anything. I don't know why. We just kept going, we passed it. I was just like, I guess this is my life now. I'm just gonna drive around with this guy, and I'm never gonna see my mom and dad again. My brother, I'm okay with that, but mom and dad, I still wanted to hang out with them for a while. And so we keep driving, and then like a few minutes later, I see our real street, because I don't know what I was thinking about that street. I don't know what that street that was. But I see like the real street and the sign for our church, and I was like, that's it. And he's like, okay. And he pulls in and pulls in into our driveway, and I'm just like, all right, thanks. And I get out, and I walk to the door, and I'm like knocking on the door of my house, and because it's still like not even maybe 6 in the morning, And so my dad's gone back to get ready for work and all that stuff, and my brother like comes to the door, and he like opens it a little bit. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, just open the door. He's like, what are you here? Like, just open the door. Like, oh my gosh, why are you questioning me right now? And so he opens the door, lets me in finally. And I get in, I just go to my room, I change into my school clothes. And I go back to the living room and just sit in my dad's recliner, wait for them to come out and take me to school. And they open I see my parents open the door and look down the hallway, like, because they hear us talking. They're like, Stephen, what are you doing here? And I was just like, so I had to explain to him. I knew I was in big trouble. So like, and I don't know why, but like they said that. My mom came and I was like, I don't know. And then like all the tears just flowed. I was so scared, mommy. So luckily I got the compassion and not the wrath at that moment. And so they freaked out. And they're like, well, what happened? I was like, I don't know. How'd you get here? And I was like, well, this guy gave me a guy who? And I was like, I don't know. He had a white Camaro. And they're just like, where is he? I was like, I don't know, man. I think and we looked down and he was gone. And I was like, I don't know. I actually never saw him drive off. I just got out the car and went to the door and didn't think about him again. And my coach got yelled at that day by my mom. But, I look back at that story, and over the years, there's so many things even in that story, and so many things that happened on that road that I know God was looking out for me. That I know that God had his angels around me, that he was protecting me, that he was watching over me, that he was making a way in the desert, that he was guiding my footsteps, that he was working in a powerful way. And depending on how we respond to these stories in our lives, it's not about the dumb kid that took off running down the road when he shouldn't have. Like, that's a dumb story, and it's very dangerous. But every time I think about that, and every time I tell that story, I believe God's getting glory for being real. I've seen people's eyes open from stories like that, not just my own, but from so many other people, where they're like, wow, this is a powerful God. This God who did this, God that made a way through this God who could do this God that can work in such a way, this God that would part the Red Sea. And so we see people that we would never think we could ever reach, people that we would think that we can never have an impact on, or we can never explain the truth to enough to reach them, but it's simply through sharing our story and what God's done in our lives, their eyes will open up, and the reality of who Jesus is becomes so real to even the furthest from God. And so let's continue reading in verse 12. So here she's talking about this. She's like, man, we've heard about all this stuff. No wonder we're all in fear, because we heard about what God did. And then she says in verse 12, now, swear to me by the Lord that you will be kind to me and my family since I've helped you. Give me some guarantee that when Jericho is conquered, you'll let me live, along with my father and mother and my brothers and sisters and all their families. We offer our own lives as a guarantee for your safety, the men agreed. If you don't betray us, we'll keep our promise and be kind to you when the Lord gives us the land. And it just reminds me of how powerful simply our trust in God is. You'll hear me say it all the time, how I grew up a pretty good kid. My parents are pastors. I don't have like this whole, you might look at me and think, this dude's got a past. No, I don't. I don't really have a crazy past. I used to tell my mom, like, I don't have that crazy story. And she was like, oh, baby, you got the greatest story, baby. God preserved you, sweetheart, because she loves me a lot, right? You're just my sweet baby girl. I don't know why you hate, girl. I said girl. I'm thinking about my little girl, and she's like, yeah, that's my brother calls me that. But she's like, you're just my little baby, blah, 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 And I don't know why you had to do that to the skin Mama gave you, but I'm like, I'm not Mama. And so she would always tell me, but that's the greatest testimony, baby. That's the greatest testimony. I got to quit talking like my mom. I'm freaking myself out. But that's the greatest testimony that God preserved you and did that. And I was like, but our trust in God is our testimony. No matter where we've been, the fact that we can trust God in our lives, the fact that we can trust Him in those circumstances, that becomes our story. That becomes what we tell other people. That's what changes lives. We simply trust in Jesus, and He's the one that changes lives. We don't have to explain things perfectly to people. We just simply trust in Jesus. I wasn't going to share this because I thought I don't want to be mean. And this person may like watch this online and then call me again. But yesterday, so my number's pretty public and out there. I've got it on all kinds of stuff, social media, websites, and all that. Because I'm just like, whatever, I don't care. And so I had someone call me yesterday while I'm like doing stuff and getting ready for everything for church. And this lady's asking me. She's very polite, but she was asking me like, hey, I've just been looking around for a church and I've just been asking some questions. I wanted to get to know a little bit more about. I saw you guys online, and she's like, I just want to know like what kind of version of the Bible you use, and if you use the King James Version. And I was like, here we go, all right. Because I think I talked to this person online before, messaging, so I was like, I think I know what's about to happen. And so I was like, okay, Jesus, be Jesus, don't let me be me. And so I was like, well, yeah, I use a lot of versions because it's the honest truth. I was like, I've got a King James Version Bible along with a whole bunch of other versions, and I use them all, and it just depends. I was like, but, we use a bunch of, and she goes on to tell me about how she's done a lot of studies, and she believes the King James is the only true version, and all this stuff. And I mean, she's being polite, and I'm not being polite, and I'm just like, okay, cool, well, I appreciate that. I mean, if you're asking, then that's not the only thing we use. I'm not discounting it at all, but I'm not putting it as the only inerrant word of God. And I was like, I mean, the Bible wasn't written in English, so it's like, and so we had a little bit of conversation, and so she kept kind of going through that little bit, and I remember thinking, and we got off the phone finally, and I just, it was kind of one of those things. I was like, you know what, I appreciate your conviction, I really do, and I appreciate the conversation, and if there's anything I can do for you, then great, awesome. I'm just going to be upfront with you. We don't see eye to eye because we didn't, I was trying to be kind and explain, because she's also saying things about other churches, and I'm like, I kind of know a lot of pastors here in town. I'm kind of friends with most of them. I was like, I don't really like the thought to say that they're they're being satanic in what they're doing, because it was kind of getting there, and I was just like, no, they're good guys. Like, I promise you, these are smart people, like, smarter than me, trust me. And I was like, and most guys I know, because I know these guys, like, we're not just looking at this version or that version. I mean, these guys know the original Hebrew and Greek, and are looking at this and studying it. I was like, I trust my pastors and friends and things like that. I was like, and I trust that. And she was like, well, I'm not buying it. I was like, well, I'm not selling it. So I was like, but I love you. And so finally I just had to get on that conversation. I was just like, hey, that's cool, man. I hope the best for you. If we can do anything for you, great. Just get to know Jesus, and you're going to be all right. I know it's about a relationship. I was like, absolutely. And I remember telling Tara about this afterwards, and I was just like, man, it hits me, though, sometimes, and I'm just like, man, how in the world can I reach someone who won't hear the truth, who won't even hear it, who already has their mind made up? I'm like, how do I do that? Because you think about, how do I reach that person who's so far gone and living in such a different lifestyle? That's not that hard. I mean, Jesus can speak to that person, and we've seen that so much. But then you see other people like, and I finally just realized it too, and I was just like, that's not my job. That's not our job as believers to just change everyone's minds and change we just trust Jesus in our lives, and He begins to work in us and becomes a light through us, and people see us and they're like, oh my gosh, God did this for them. This is the true God. Oh my God, God made a way where there wasn't a way. And so we see this play out here with Rahab and these guys, the spies that were there. They hid out for a little while. They left, and then they reported back. Verse 23, we're skipping down. It says, the two spies came down from the hill country. They crossed the Jordan River and reported to Joshua all that had happened to him. The Lord has given us the whole land, they said, for all the people in the land are terrified of us. Now think for a second. There's two guys that went into the town, a walled, protected city. They didn't fight. They didn't have a battle and win anything. They just heard the report. They heard the news from Rahab. They heard how the attitudes were from the people, and they came back and reported not how strong they were. They didn't report, well, there's guards on here and here and here. We're going to have a really hard time over here because they're strong here. We've got to be careful. And I'm sure they got in there, but they didn't report that. They didn't report like, well, there's X amount of people and we're going to have to really watch this. They reported back and said, guys, it's done. The Lord's given us the land. Like, all the people are terrified of us. Like, they know who our God is, and we know that God is with us. It is a done deal. And when we begin to live this kind of courageous life, this kind of trust and reliance in God, is when we realize that God finishes our battles before we even face them. Before we even have to step foot on the battlefield, we're reporting back and saying, man, God has given us the victory in this. That comes from a confidence in your spirit to know that the enemy is terrified of the Spirit of God living in me. That the enemy cannot overcome the God that's on my side. I mean, when we realize that, we should be walking around, confident. Like, I just imagine our spirit should just be walking around doing the Conor McGregor, just like, yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, just, oh my God. Like, God says, this is over. The battle's already won. Like, the victory is ours. Like, it doesn't matter what I'm facing. It doesn't matter what addiction I have. It doesn't matter what obstacles in front of me. I know that God already has the victory before I even have to face it. And yeah, I'm going to have to face it. I'm going to have to go through it a little bit. But I'm reporting back from the beginning that God has the victory because I can remember what He's done in the past. I remember His faithfulness, and I act accordingly. I act according to His promises, not the circumstances. So as we close, I want you to begin to think what this looks like in your life. What battles are you facing in your life? What struggles are ahead of you? What enemies are standing against you? Begin in your own time, begin to declare God's victory over those battles. During worship, that's a time where we're declaring God's victory over the battles that we're facing in life. In our time in prayer, we go and we seek God and we ask God, but then we praise and thank Him for the victory that He's already given us. That's how we walk in faith and a complete trust in Him. Let's pray. And as we do, think and picture those battles that you're facing. Think and picture those enemies that are standing against you. Think about the walls that are in front of you, that are between you and the promises of God. God's promised you health and wholeness and family, but there's sickness and there's disease in front of you. God's promised you provision. God's promised you an abundant life, but there's uncertainties and difficulties in front of you. Speak to those walls. Declare God's victory before you even face the battle. Trust in Him and His faithfulness and His goodness. And the enemy will tremble at the thought of the God that is working in your life. For so many of us, the biggest obstacle that we face is ourselves. So many times we keep ourselves from having God's best. Maybe we've never believed in Him as our Savior. Maybe we have, but we haven't really fully surrendered to Him. We're too scared to give that up. We want God's best for us, but we also want our life as we know it. I would challenge you to make a decision today. Don't be 1 foot in and 1 foot out. Don't try to follow God, but also lead yourself. Trust God. Trust Him to be your leader. Trust Him to go before you. And follow Him with reckless abandonment. And I promise that His victory will be yours, that His grace will be yours, that His goodness and His love and His mercy will be yours, that His fullness will be yours. Father, I thank you for every life here. Lord, maybe someone's here or they're listening or watching this, God, and it's time for them to make that decision, to surrender their life to you. I would ask that you begin to move in their hearts, speak to their hearts now. Let them know that you are with them, that your presence is there even now. Reassure them and show them that they don't have to become someone different or do anything different, but right where they are, they can seek you. No matter where they've been or who they are, they can be used by you in a mighty way. And if you're ready to make that decision and to surrender your life, you can just say, Jesus, I know I'm a sinner. I've been living life my way, and I'm ready to choose your way. Jesus, I believe that you are the way, the truth, and the life. That you died on a cross to pay for my sin. Jesus, I want to trust you and I want to follow you. Jesus, I want your best for me, not my best. So, Lord, I give you my life. And I accept your guidance and your leadership and your direction. I thank you for your love. I thank you for your Spirit. Lord, help all of us to renew that commitment every day, to trust you more, to follow you closer, that others would see what you're doing in our lives and they would turn to you because of it. We thank you for this. In Jesus' name, amen.